Snow White is going through some bad PR before it's even out, and we'll talk about it more in just a second here, as I have a couple of thoughts. So Rachel Zegler has effectively put her foot in her mouth multiple times when doing PR for Snow White. Not recent PR, mind you, but stuff that was happening before the SAG-AFTRA strike. And her comments during the SAG-AFTRA strike led a lot of people to do some digging on some of her PR pre-strike, and a lot of it isn't very good. And multiple people have already made videos talking about this, but I wanted to weigh in. Originally, I wasn't going to talk about this because I felt like, well, everybody's talking about it, and most people have made the best points that they can, but I had a couple of thoughts about them that I wanted to kind of run past people. I've got this article from Bounding into Comics that says, Rachel Zegler says Prince stalked Snow White in original film, reveals live-action version is really not about the love story at all. Upcoming Snow White actress Rachel Zegler has some pointed comments about the film when she discussed it back in September 2022 at the D23 Expo, describing that Disney depicted the prince in the original animated movie as a stalker. No, they didn't. That's the wrong perception of the character. They just didn't. She thought she was being clever here, and I'll talk about it once I finish the article. Zegler shared her comments with Extra TV when she was asked, I know you told me before that your version of Snow White is different and it's more of a 2022 version of Snow White. What did you mean by that? Zegler responded, the original cartoon came out in 1937 and is very evidently so. There's a big focus on her love story with a guy who literally stalks her. Weird. Weird. So we didn't do that this time, Zegler admitted. When asked if the prince would ever even be in the film, Zegler answered, we have a different approach to what I'm sure a lot of people will assume is a love story just because, like, we cast a guy in the movie, Andrew Burnap, great dude. She continued, it's one of those things that I think everybody's going to have their assumptions about what's actually going to be. So they're making it ambiguous, which already ruins the original because it wasn't ambiguous, it was straightforward. But it's really not about the love story at all, which is really, really wonderful. How... See, that's an offensive comment because what's wrong with a love story? There's nothing wrong with a love story. I mean, love stories are classic. This is a timeless classic film. But again, we'll get there once I'm finished with this. And whether or not she finds love along the way is anybody's guess until 2024. All of Andrew's scenes could get, who knows, it's Hollywood, baby. Zegler then revealed what the film is really about. It's an inner journey that she goes on to find her true self, and she met a lot of people along the way that make the journey really incredible. Zegler, alongside Gal Gadot, who plays the evil queen, or Gal Gadot, whichever, who plays the evil queen in the upcoming film, previously informed Variety that Zegler's Snow White would not be rescued by the prince. When asked what she meant by describing that the film has a, quote, modern edge, Zegler said, quote, I just mean it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White. Gal Gadot interjected, she's not going to be saved by the prince. Zegler then affirmed she's not going to be saved by the prince and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. Because both of those things are objectively bad in 2024. I want people to think about that for just a minute. Zegler elaborated, she's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, the leader that her late father told her she could be if she was fearless, brave, and true. And so it's just a really incredible story for, I think, young people everywhere to see themselves in. And the original wasn't? Speaking with Entertainment Weekly, Zegler also revealed that the film is also changing the definition of, quote, fair for the film. The original animated film made it clear the term referred to beauty and was providing a lesson vanity. A lesson in vanity, I'm sure they meant to say. This will no longer be the definition for Zegler's live-action movie. She explained, the reality is that the cartoon was made 85 years ago, and therefore it's extremely dated when it comes to the ideas of women being in roles of power, and what a woman is fit for in the world. And so when we came to reimagining the actual role of Snow White, it became about the fairest of them all, meaning who is the most just and who can become a fantastic leader. Zegler continued, and the reality is, you know, Snow White has to learn a lot of lessons about coming into her own power before she can come into power over a kingdom. Gadot, who played the evil queen, added, also the fact that she's not going to be saved by the prince and she's the proactive one, and she's the one who set the terms in what makes it so relevant to where we are today. Oh, dear gosh, I used to respect Gal Gadot. That's just PR nonsense. While Zegler repeatedly claimed that the original 1937 animated film was dated, she revealed to Entertainment Weekly she hadn't seen it since she was a child before being cast for the movie. I was scared of the original cartoon. I think I watched it once and I never picked it up again. Exactly who you want starring in your role. I'm being so serious. I watched it once, and then I went on the ride in Disney World, which was called Snow White's Scary Adventures. Doesn't sound like something a little kid would like. Was terrified of it, never revisited Snow White again. Okay. She then said, so I watched it for the first time in probably 16, 17 years when I was doing this film. Oh, good. Well, at least she rewatched it. What do you make of Ziegler describing the prince as a stalker and revealing the film will no longer feature a love story? Okay. So a couple of thoughts here. Is there audio playing in the background? Because I know sometimes you'll have John talking in the background. He does these video things on the pages, so I don't know if that's coming through. I don't think it is, but here's my thing, okay? She is, what, 22, 23 years old? She's been in at least 3 movies, many of which were flops. She's being propped up as this modern, more progressive version of Snow White. So already from the beginning, people who understand Disney's ideology and what they do, they're not a fan of that. So that's strike one. Strike two is when she opens her mouth and tries to say, we are redefining Snow White, because she's just confirming the fears that fans of the original film had in terms of trying to subvert everybody's expectations because it's 2023, 2024, and we can't have traditional romance, traditional gender roles, gender norms, all of that. She's got all of the woke talking points. She's also got multiple pronouns in her bio, so she's wearing her ideology on her sleeve. And the next point is she clearly doesn't know how to do PR. When she's asked these types of questions, she doesn't know how to approach it, especially when it comes to being privileged enough to be a part of a franchise that built Walt Disney. The original Snow White built the Walt Disney Studios. They have got the 7 dwarves holding up the roof of one of their main buildings in Burbank. It's actually really beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful things that Imagineers have done. I wish I could see it in person, but apparently that's not even really open to tourists, so most people see it in pictures and some of the videos they do. It's really awesome. It's a really nice tribute to those characters and to what Walt had to sacrifice to make Snow White. And that is my overall point, is that she is young and naive, and she does not understand that Snow White means a lot to a lot of people. It is not seen as sexist. It is not seen as discriminatory. It is not seen as... The prince is certainly not seen as a stalker or predatory. He's not Pepe Le Pew. And I love Looney Tunes, but, I mean, you could make some pretty solid cases for Pepe Le Pew being somewhat of a scumbag. But that's not the story of Snow White, the Disney Snow White. Now, the original Snow White is quite a bit different from the Disney version, but people are talking specifically about the 1937 Disney movie, of which she seems to have no real love for. So she's doing this cynically in order to try and remake it for an audience that doesn't really actually exist. There's only a minority of people who think exactly like she does, and that goes into the deeper issue of the Hollywood bubble. That's where she's speaking from, because that's all she knows. She's surrounded by a Hollywood bubble. She's most likely been privileged her entire life, you know? It's like when Margot Robbie said, well, I don't even remember if I played with Barbies. Sure, she could probably act in the role fine, but you want these people to actually recognize the properties that they're, and appreciate the properties that they're adapting to film. From the actors to the writers to everybody involved, there needs to be some level of appreciation for the original, and it just doesn't seem like there's any there. And what's worse, she's actively criticizing elements of the original that people don't agree with. The original is a timeless classic. Disney used to do what they called the Walt Disney Classics, or the Vault Classics, where once home video became a thing, they would re-release these films on VHS, and then eventually they got to DVD, and now they're doing Blu-rays, where they would release these special editions of Walt's classics that they had adapted, and people grabbed them up. They're worth a lot of money now. They're beloved. They're timeless classics. Snow White, Cinderella, Beauty and the Beast, all of these traditional fairy tales that have been adopted and stories of princesses are beloved by both men and women alike, because they're good animation, they're good storytelling. Now, I'm not the target demographic for them, but they're seen as family films, classic family films, and a good study on things like animation and character design and storytelling. You know, they're just timeless classics, and she doesn't appreciate them because she's a part of a generation that is told everything that comes before you is bad. It's sexist, it's misogynist, it's racist, it's whatever. And people are tired of hearing this narrative again and again and again. So that is why people are going after her, because they don't want to hear that. The movie itself, based on the promo material, already looks bad enough. She's not doing the film any favors. Now, I do think that people need to be a lot better in terms of how they're treating her, because she's on the younger side. And she's clearly inexperienced in terms of doing this much press for something as big as Snow White. I mean, the biggest thing she did before this was, what, Shazam? So, and she did West Side Story from Steven Spielberg. But, I mean, this is Disney. This is the real big leagues, and this is a Disney classic, and you want the press to be... And even Gal Gadot has disappointed me with this, with her comments. Clearly, they're both just... They're so into that Hollywood bubble that they can't appreciate the classics for what they are. They have to look at the classics through a modern lens and find everything wrong with them, and that's not how you approach classics. Walt Disney was a great guy for all intents and purposes. He wasn't flawless, but he knew how to make animated and live-action films, and he worked very hard to do so. And so when you take a dump all over the classic the way that Rachel Z here is, of course people are going to respond this way, and she was never prepared for this, which is really unfortunate. The people around her should have told her, you really need to be careful what you're saying about this, because this is a really timeless classic. Most of these Disney movies are timeless classics. They've got fan bases over generations. Snow White has been passed down probably 4 or 5 generations now. It's, like she said, over 85 years old. It's been around for a very long time. Most of these movies have. And you need to show a level of appreciation for that, which unfortunately, people in her generation just can't grasp this, because, again, they were taught the wrong things about the classics. They were taught that the classics are evil, and that they should be cynical about them, and that they should point and laugh at them because we're more enlightened. The Critical Drinker said that in his video. And that's not the way to do it. You need to approach it with a level of respect, even if you don't like it. You don't go out and say, I don't like the property that I'm dealing with, because it comes across as cynical. If you don't care, why should the audience care? Why should the audience go to watch this movie if you're just going to dump on it 24/7 and you're going to make a version that subverts everything that people say made the originals great? It doesn't make any sense. So, I mean, she's making mistake after mistake, and now she's turning around and saying, I wish the world was a better place. She's trying to play victim now, and it's not going to work, because while I've said before, I think some people probably took it too far because welcome to the internet, you invited that by constantly opening your mouth and saying the wrong things. If she didn't say what she did during SAG-AFTRA strike, if she didn't say, I deserve to be paid every hour that I'm in a classic dress for an iconic Disney princess, people wouldn't have gone digging for these old interviews and finding out that really it turns out you not only don't respect that character, but you just come across as entitled. She's doing small things to make herself more and more obnoxious, but she's doing the only thing that she knows. And that's why I'm not too harsh on her, is because she doesn't know anything other than her progressive politics in the Hollywood bubble. She's just ignorant. She's just a young, ignorant starlet. That's it. And Disney should know better than having her do PR, and thankfully the strikes are going on, so she can't really say too much else anyways. But it's just fascinating because as more goes on, she's trying to play victim on social media, and I'm sure there are people out there trying to defend her. But the reality is that Disney needs Snow White to succeed. If it doesn't, they're going to lose a lot of money, and they've already been losing a lot of money. Peter Pan and Wendy, Little Mermaid, Indiana Jones, they're about to lose money with the Marvels. They can't keep up this string of absurd losses. They need a win, and they're not going to get one with Snow White. It should have been scrapped to begin with, but they won't do it because of all the contractual agreements and because it looks bad to investors. But they're on a bad track, and Rachel Zegler doing the PR the way that she did is not great, even though a lot of it's older. Like they said, this was D23 back in 2022. That's not helping matters. Her and Gal Gadot are basically tearing the original apart and saying, we're doing a better one. We're doing one that is more relatable. I watched the original back sometime in the 90s, I think, for the first time. It was just as relevant then as it was in 1937. It's a classic fairy tale. It's Disney's adaptation of a classic fairy tale. If you don't like the way those stories are told, then don't do anything with those projects. But it's all cynical. It's about a paycheck. It's not about being passionate about what you're doing anymore. It's about doing the best performance getting paid and going home. And that's why people were upset. People were upset because her cynical attitude with those comments in the SAG-AFTRA strike where she's like, I deserve to get paid for this iconic work I'm doing. But it's not iconic. You're stealing iconography from something that is far better than what you are going to do. A far better version of this character than what you're going to do. And there have been better adaptations that are non-Disney, that are closer to the books, or the book. I think there's several books. I'm not a Snow White lore guy. But she doesn't understand what she's doing. She doesn't understand what she's working with. She's young. She's impulsive. She looks like she's constantly on Twitter all the time, which is already a mistake. I got off Twitter years ago. So a lot of this is just her being young and not understanding. Now, some people are trying to say, well, she's doing Disney's PR for them. She's saying exactly what Disney wants to hear. And if that is the case, that is doubly bad for Disney. Disney is just proving beyond a shadow of a doubt that they have no respect for their legacy whatsoever, and they're all about tarnishing their legacy. They're back in Reimagine Tomorrow mode, which was awful. It's an awful campaign. Respect the past. Learn from the past. I was watching a video the other day from Steven Spielberg, one of his interviews with the American Film Institute, and he was saying how important it is to study classic film and how disappointed he was, and this was back in the early to mid-2000s, how disappointed he was that modern film students have a cutoff for what films they study from what time period. Some cut off at black and white. And you shouldn't do that. Spielberg got all he did from the classic black and white adventure serials and movies like Citizen Kane that he watched. That's how he became one of the greatest directors of all time. You don't just presume greatness because you're young and you're progressive and you're whatever. You learn from the past. You don't just tear it to pieces. You don't just assume that the past was full of ignorant rubes that didn't know what they were doing. That's highly insulting, and it's insulting to people who have created generational traditions around this entertainment. And she doesn't understand this. These concepts are foreign to her, and she's realizing that she's really offended a lot of people while she's in an ideology that claims to be so non-offensive. I think that bothers her, honestly. She created a chief offense. It's like going into somebody's house and telling somebody their picture of their grandmother is racist or sexist or whatever today, and saying they should tear it down. That's effectively what she did. She came into somebody's house and she started insulting pictures of their family on the wall. It's absolutely ridiculous. You do not do this, and she's learning really quickly that you don't do this. But again, I think people need to be careful in how they're criticizing her while they're going on Twitter directly to her and what they're saying. Because at the end of the day, she's not going to learn if you're just going to go to Twitter and you're going to make a stink and you're going to start calling her names or worse yet, threatening. Don't ever do that. I'm sure there are some lunatics out there who did. But she kicked a hornet's nest, and that's just a part of learning. And the only thing I can hope is that she learns, but given her upbringing and her status, I don't think she's going to learn anything. It's just going to reaffirm her more progressive stance that I'm in the right and everybody else is in the wrong. If she humbles herself and learns from this, then she could go on to do some really great things. But right now, people are comparing her to Brie Larson, and that's not a good thing. Brie Larson was really... She seems to have been humbled by a lot of this to the point where she doesn't speak up as much anymore because she can't put up with it. She tried YouTube, it failed miserably. Just that those stupid comments that she made people hate her. And she realized for the first time in her life that I can screw up to the point where people don't like me anymore. And I think that that's what Rachel Z here is going to figure out. But she should not be doing PR for Disney for this. She should not be doing what she's doing right now. She's putting her foot in her mouth. She's ruining Disney's reputation. She's making it almost a guarantee that certain people aren't going to see this movie, and so it's going to underperform. They might have to dump it to streaming and just call it a day. Nobody has hope it's going to be good. The whole 7 dwarfs thing, 7 magical creatures, the heck is that? This is Disney's Snow White. It's iconic. They need to stay in line with that. That's what people expect. Give people what they want, not what you in the Hollywood bubble progressively want for them. They don't want your version of the thing. They want the thing. And that's what people need to understand. So, all in all, this is just bad PR. And it's not going to help the movie. And I just hope that Rachel Z and, to a lesser extent, Gal Gadot realize that this whole right side of history nonsense, they just need to let it go. Just embrace the classics, and if you don't do these movies. But they're never going to say no to a paycheck, so it is what it is. Thank you very much for watching. This has been Super Koopa TV. Remember, Hollywood doesn't respect you. God bless. Have a good one. Peace.